here. And we want to make sure that we attend to that in real time. So we just want to get a vibe check going to see how you're coming into the space, but also this allows me as a facilitator to help you and assist you the best way that I can during our time together and even throughout the series of this project. So you can feel free to come off mute after I finish explaining what this traffic light check-in really is and what it gets at, or you can feel free to drop it in the chat if you've already begun to read what these descriptions mean. I always like to preface you can choose your own adventure. So while red, yellow, green is what's presented here, if you find yourself feeling yellow or cerulean or whatever other color you can manage to create based on what's here, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. You don't have to be married to these. And I also like to recognize that these can change throughout a meeting. So you may come in red, but by the end of this, that's my hope that you leave on green feeling charged and energized and ready to engage in this work with one another on this call, with your councils and your communities. So red means that you might be feeling a little distressed or distracted, right? You're really having a hard time today, struggling to focus. Maybe you're a little anxious and unsettled, or maybe not feeling that great. There are tons of things going around. So, we're coming out of winter, so that very well could be a reality for you. And that's where you're sitting at. In terms of coming into the space, you're here and logged on, but maybe you're off camera, maybe you're lying in bed, maybe you have a blanket on, or you have some tea because you're just trying to show up and be here, but you don't really have it to fully contribute today. Yellow means you're somewhere in between red and green, right? You might be feeling uncertain or pensive, or altogether, you might not be sure how this is gonna go. And that's how your day might be going. So you're finding yourself, I can engage, but like my level of engagement might teeter back and forth depending on what you ask of me. Green means I'm feeling good, I'm charged up, I'm ready to go. Any question you have for me, Brittany, I'm going to answer it. I'm going to be active in the chat. I'm going to come off mute. I'm on camera. You're just fully showing up in the space, utilizing all aspects of how you can be in here, even in your emojis. So these just are a couple ways that you can come into the space or find yourself operating in throughout the day. I'm seeing the chat really grow with responses. Definitely feel free to keep dropping those in if you're comfortable. And even come off mute and we can allow some space to get some voices in here to let us know how you're feeling. If you want to lift up something that you said in the chat, or maybe you haven't dropped it there and are waiting for me to stop talking so that you can share openly with everybody else. Yeah, Nicole, I see you have a
Um,
hand.
I am gonna say that I'm green, but I'm very distracted because it's nice outside, and that is always a struggle for me when we're coming out of winter and it like hits above 60. So I feel positive, but I'm also very distracted and excited that it's warm outside.
Thank you so much for your contribution and transparency, Nicole. I couldn't think of a better distraction, so I'll take that any day. And I'm happy that you finally got some warm weather. Any other folks?
Hi, my name is Pamela, and I'm green, and I'm a tad bit distracted because this is my very first live meeting with you guys. So I'm excited and interested and excited. So
Welcome, Pamela. Thanks for sharing. And you're getting some welcomes in the chat. We love that.
thank
One more
you.
person. Anyone else want to share? Okay. I'm going to take the silence as a no, and that's not a problem at all for folks just now joining us. This was just a little check in that we were doing to get a vibe check of how folks were coming into the space. Feel free to continue to read through other folks' responses and even drop your own in the chat. And a nice hello and where you're logging in from. So, in terms of how we're going to, is someone off me? Did anybody have a question? Okay. I think folks are just off me. That's okay. All right, so in terms of how we'll be spending our time today, we're going to explore and analyze power. So, what does that mean? How have we seen it show up in our spaces that we occupy, our society, systems, and structures? And what does that have to do with power mapping? We're going to work to understand that concept. So, why is it important? What are those intricate details and components that we need to consider? Like, who should be a part of that process, and what does that look like, and when should you even start? And then we're going to practice power mapping. So I am going to share my screen and we're going to engage in some power mapping around a goal that I've brought into the space to use as an example today, just so that we can get a feel of what that looks like so that you know how you can approach it when you go back to your spaces. Are there any points of clarity, thoughts, reflections, questions about how we're going to be utilizing our time? Okay. If at any time you find yourself having a question, just feel free to use your hand emoji. It should be at the very bottom for you. Or you can just feel free to come off mute and say, "Hey, Brittany, I have a thought, contribution to make, whatever feels best." Or you can utilize the chat. Definitely contribute in a capacity that works best for you. All right. So I have a question for you all, and you can come off mute or drop it in the chat, whatever feels best for you. But before we start talking about concept mapping, I mean power mapping, excuse me, it makes sense for us to get a shared understanding about what power is and how it's shown up over time within our system, structure, and society. So when you think of power, what words, phrases, and or ideas come to mind for you? When you think of power, what words, phrases, ideas, pictures, song lyrics, whatever comes to mind, what comes up for you? Influence, social capital, decision makers. Yeah, leverage, strength, people in charge, team building. Okay. Information, absolutely. We could probably continue to build on an exhaustive list, right? Ability to make change. Thanks, Joyce. Money, power, respect. Okay, we got some. Is that Queen Latifah? Please don't don't judge me if that's not quite right, but I think it is. Um, but we could probably think of a very exhaustive list of what this looks like and even trickle it down to personal experiences of how we've seen that manifest over time. So the purpose for this workshop, though, we can think of power as the ability to control or influence others, decisions, or events. And we've seen power show up many different ways in our society, right? We see it in our social spheres, where power that stems from the networks and relationships um, people have within social structures exists. We definitely see it in our political realm, where there's this authority held by institutions to enact, enforce, or even interpret laws or regulations. At an economic level, we've definitely seen it there, having control over resources, wealth, or financial capital. And probably the one that we operate in the most, that we don't even realize oftentimes how these like narratives kind of pop up about what's right, true, beautiful, correct. All of those are different types of power that we consistently engage with, and they show up in various ways. So, why is it important that we understand power in the terms of power mapping? Well, understanding the structures and systems of power enables you to better equip yourself to challenge inequities and injustices. So it gives us a lay of the land of what we're able to see in terms of hurdles or opportunities that exist around a specific area of or issue. Second, it helps us in learning about how power helps works to help individuals protect and know their rights and defend their interests and work. And last but certainly not least, knowledge of power helps individuals and groups identify common interests and work with organizations and entities to build solidarity. So we're able to see who we can partner with in this work, right? If we're taking it back to my intro about health equity not being a singular pursuit, who can we be in deep relationship with and thought partnership with and bounce ideas off of as we're trying to intricately navigate so many different systems, so many different narratives that exist and are created every single day that work up against the issues that we're trying to work to dismantle. So, all of these aspects are really crucial to understand prior to engaging in the act of power mapping because it helps provide that full context, that full grounding as we think of ways to approach our areas of interest. Who should be involved in them, and then who has a vested interest in the issue that we're trying to focus on, whether that be good, bad, or indifferent. So, what is power mapping? Well, it's the visualization of the relationships between different stakeholders, power, and interests related to a specific issue, decision, or a campaign. So, you'll typically see from that picture all the way up at the top, you'll typically see them set up to address two key dimensions that help analyze power dynamics, relationships, and influences around a specific area of issue. So there's usually a vertical axis or the y axis that usually depicts the level of power or influence that one has. And then there's a horizontal axis or the x axis that represents the interest, alignment, or engagement around a specific issue. So when is it appropriate to engage in power mapping? When you're trying to better understand broader social, political, and economic environments that exist and definitely can have an impact on your issue area and goal. When you're looking to identify key influential players who have a vested interest in your cause or area that you're trying to focus on. And lastly, when you're thinking of building out contingency planning. So if you're thinking about, hey, how do we continue this work if this person leaves or if this political climate shifts or whatever may happen, you're thinking of those people who are already doing the work, but also serve as avenues for you to continue to build on your own as you're thinking through sustainability of different spheres of your work. Are there any questions about things that I've shared so far before we get into all the steps that are involved in power mapping?
Are we going to be able to get a transcript or the recorded copy of this meeting, the
Yeah.
session?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay.
I think we're gonna post it on Padlet, right, Cassie?
Thank
Yes,
you.
yep, we will reach out to everyone once it's been uploaded to Padlet. And Pamela will make sure you have all that login information as well.
Thanks, Cassie. Any other questions from folks before we move forward? Alrighty. So these are all of the steps that are a part of power mapping. And if you Google or look up any sort of resources around power or power mapping or power analysis, this list might shift around a little bit. But so I wouldn't stay married to the steps per se, but they are all intricate components to consider when you are thinking about mapping key players that have a vested interest in your issue area. So you may see at the center that we're going to start with a goal. So each of you have them. Most folks do within their councils. What are you trying to accomplish? Whether that's been created in-house, reflective of community need, all of you have a central goal that should be the focus of when you're trying to map out who you want to include, who's in opposition that you need to bring on along, and so on and so forth. So making sure you have a goal is going to be your first step. And then all of these things around that goal is really going to help you get into some action planning in terms of next steps. And like, hey, after we've identified folks who have a vested interest in this topic, what do we want to do with that now? So all of these things are going to kind of help give context and shed light on how you can move forward with what you discover after you've mapped folks. So we're going to break these down and go over these steps one by one because there's a lot packed in there. So we're going to start with step one. So I've touched on this a little bit with just being clear about identifying a goal. So a part of that is being clear on what the community hopes to achieve or what the community need is. I like to always say nothing about community without community. So ensuring that your work is being driven by their contributions, their thoughts, their needs being centered is really crucial to health equity and social justice work, no matter what the topic is, right? You want to make sure you identify specific goals your council has identified to improve your area of issue or cause, right? So now that we've identified a goal, what are some things that we want to do to dismantle that? How can we bring in a mocha or whatever kind of structure or outline you want to use to identify, hey, what are some things that we can begin to bring this goal to life or dismantle this disparity that we're starting to see? And then last but not least, you want to make sure you identify any priorities, needs, and desires of the communities most impacted by your issue area of choice or your cause. Two is going to be very important as well because you want to establish a team. While some folks do this independently because maybe their organization
I'll be
starts
back.
off small and they're working as a team of one, and certainly they don't have anyone else to engage with. You want to make sure you have people at the table to engage in this mapping exercise so that you have people who have different perspectives and have those different lenses thinking about, hey, what about this person who also said last week, like, I do have a vested interest in making Michigan Avenue safe and making it a walkable space for people. How about this community member who's been actively trying to engage in this space? So, really, it's just about making sure you're inclusive before you start mapping of all the folks who have a vested interest in moving this work forward. So involve community members too, and people most familiar with your specific area or cause. That's very helpful in terms because maybe they have relationships that extend even beyond the space that you all are currently sitting in. And last but not least, make sure to involve allies and partners with insight into local community relationships and or groups who have successfully advanced similar changes. So that's getting to at those other organizations that exist that might be smaller or larger, but you all are working pretty much in parallel in terms of the work that you're doing. The next component of that is you want to identify key players. So think about who might be key decision makers, whether it be a person or even an entity, and do a little research on them, right? Think through important questions like what might these people be interested in? What's their track record on a certain issue? Are they in support of this or have they been in opposition to this? And why? Are there practices, rules, resources that kind of have swayed their engagement or influence around this area in the past, who might be a part of their social networks, and who influences them both professionally and personally, and maybe even some more of those spheres of power that we thought about. So, economically or culturally could fit there as well. And then you want to start mapping, right? So we want to identify where each actor or key player is that we've identified after we've gotten this exhaustive list, because that could take a number of hours in and of itself. If we're thinking about all the people who care about a particular issue and we document those, we have to then map them amongst on our map into our little 4 quadrants based on the level of influence they have and based on their alignment on that issue. Then think about if their positionality is subject to change based on the current climate. So maybe folks were really doing work in a certain way during a period of time, but something happened and then they switch. Maybe you don't you meet maybe you see a divestment or them not showing up in the same spaces or ways that they once were before. Step 5, you really want to identify the relationships. So after you've mapped everyone on your paper, your whiteboard, however you choose to engage in that work, you want to look at the relationships that may exist amongst the people that you've placed on the paper. Some people do this by color coordinating sticky notes if they all are a business, or if they are all community members or community-based organizations. However you choose to do that, you just want to make sure and be able to draw connections amongst the people that you've already mapped, not only to each other, but also like how well are you connected to the people that you've identified. In step 6, you want to analyze your map. So to ensure that you've listed all possible parties, and like that could be an ever growing list, but like just taking a step back and saying, okay, now that we've named folks, now that we've placed them on our map, is there anyone else that we're missing? Because just simply thinking about their level of influence and their alignment on an issue could spark like, oh, I forgot about this organization. So when you take a step back, maybe even take a day or a break from it, just to think about other people who might have a vested interest around that cause. That might be helpful as well. Think about the policies, practices, or resources that impact where actors and key players have been placed on the map. So that would be probably be the current climate that we're in, that plays a role in that. And begin thinking about which actors and key players you can collaborate with or connect with to move forward. Think about the existing relationships that individual people may have to those different organizations, and think of ways to leverage those as you are analyzing your map. Then step 7, we're identifying next steps. So now that we've gotten all our folks named, we documented them on our sheet, on our board, on our computer. We've taken a step back and analyzed to make sure we have all of the folks there and thought about why we placed them there, on the sheet or on our list to begin with, or why we positioned them in a certain way on our map. Think about, hey, how can I engage with folks regardless of where they feel fall in terms of their alignment? So if it's, hey, these people are strongly committed to our cause, what leverage points or folks do we have who already have relationships there? If there are people in opposition, how can we get into this person's office hours to sit down and talk to them about this specific issue? Are they in connection with someone who is supportive of our cause? Can we use that person in that relationship and leverage that to make a connection so that we still have relationship room and opportunity to build relationship with that person, and possibly bring them over to the supported side of our map? So sometimes you can delegate that work. You can create a committee or a delegate an individual person to find those opportunities for collaboration and relationship building. Really, it's up to you and whatever is going to work best for you and your council. You want to begin thinking about contingency planning and sustainability, right? So if we're constantly finding that people that are in support of our issue are slowly but surely losing influence for whatever reason it is, what does that mean for our work and our partnerships? And how do we think about moving this forward if for whatever reason this is subject to change? Because that's the thing about power maps, they're never going to stay the same because the climate doesn't stay the same. People's positionality doesn't stay the same. So that's something to consider when you're building these out. And lastly, you want to establish check-ins to explore new developments, like those shifts that may have occurred, organizations or parameters pertaining to your issue. Because as we've seen lately, things can change daily in terms of where people fall in terms of their support on a certain issue versus where they're divesting from one. So there are a couple of benefits. Again, an exhaustive list. We could stay here all day thinking about why this would be such a crucial tool we need. But if we only had to name 3, just for our time, it's a tool that's really helpful in educating, empowering community members who may be new to working to advancing specific types of changes, right? It increases networking and relationship building opportunities. So we're expanding our reach. If you remember from the series where we were talking about systems change, relationships and connections is definitely sandwiched in between those mental models and that systemic change that we hope to see. So we can only make change if we're in a relationship with people. So how are we looking for opportunities to expand our reach and our network with folks? And lastly, it increases our awareness of the current landscape, involvement, and divestment in your issue area or cause. So these are just some of the benefits, and I'm sure we could think of plenty more. And I encourage you, even when you engage in this activity, to think through some of these things as you engage with your council members and community in power mapping. What is power? How do you individually, as a body of people, define power? Why is it important that we centralize this in terms of mapping out our partners? What benefits are going to come of this? That can be really, really helpful for you all to think through together and collectively as you begin to engage in something like this. So before we do any power mapping, before I share my screen and show you all an example of that, and I'm definitely going to ask for some assistance, so feel free to come off mute and things when I ask for your ideas, because I love getting you guys engaged and energized in some workshops. But are there any questions before we pivot to doing that? I know this is a familiar concept to some.
Hey, Brittany, I had a question.
Yeah.
And you might be covering this later, so my apologies if you do. I know like 2 years ago, as part of our health equity councils, we had to complete an eco map. And I'm wondering how we maybe leverage that for something like this, because I don't, I'm a big believer on if we have some materials or documents that we can utilize, how do we do that already to kind of build something out from there? So I was wondering if you had any insight with that.
Yeah, I am familiar. I know that they've mentioned the eco maps to me. Cassie, I see you nodding, so I'm going to welcome you into this space to help me out with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that is going to be a really helpful piece, right? And to Brittany's point, some of those folks, some of those players may still be in spaces where they'd be able to help leverage movement on issues. Some may not. So those eco maps, you can dust them off absolutely, and possibly in combination with the partner mapping activity that folks did as well. Those could be really helpful when you do this, because power mapping is about one issue at a time. So you'd be able to make multiple power maps based off of an issue. So you may be able to, around education, let's just say, who are the players in those spaces? And they may already be on your eco map, so that'd be a great place to start and look. They may be around your table as the council, right? And then the power map itself is a tool to help you identify how to move on an issue. So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight and how it's different and more actionable in this sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I am muted. Any other questions, points of clarity, thoughts, reflections from folks? Thanks for your question, Nicole.
Um,
Yeah, go for it. I see your hand.
Hi, this is Nancy. I'm just, and you got to excuse me. I'm in a lot of pain, so I'm not looking my best today. But hey, I just want to say this is really great dialogue. As I'm listening to this, I'm sitting here thinking about how mapping things really make a difference, and it's just kind of empowering to hear. And I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for the content. Because again, as we have our boots on the ground, as I say, you know what I mean? It's like I try to organize what I do in a particular way, and this just kind of signifies that I'm on the right path, but yet this kind of puts it in context to where it'd be more explainable and to follow. So thank you.
Yeah, Nancy, thanks for that. It's our game plan, right? If we had to roll out a sheet of paper and create a game plan before we're ready to engage, what does it look like? And power mapping is just one version of that. I'm sure there are multiple versions that exist for different types of things. I'm holding my ear because my headset is trying to run away from me. Um, but we could think of multiple ways that we can say, how can we document this and use this as a catalyst so that our next meeting, we're ready to hit the ground running. We already have some things and we have something to ground ourselves in. It doesn't have to just be pretty paper that's on the wall. It can be something that we're like, hey, remember when we did this and we documented this? How are we intricately using this and leveraging these relationships throughout the time, like if we're walking and chewing gum at the same time, how are we continuing to build relationships and bring people who are in opposition to our cause over to support our cause, all while still moving this work forward? So I like to think of it as our game plan, if you will, for how to move the work forward. Dottie, I see your square highlighted, but I'm not hearing any sound. Were you trying to say something?
No,
Okay.
I'm on the road. I'm on the road actually, so no, I'm just listening at this time.
Okay, no worries. I just didn't want to hop over you if you had something to say and invite you into the space. No worries.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, we're going to take a 5-minute-ish break before we re-engage. So the time now is 3:32, at least in Eastern Standard Times, which I think we are all on. So feel free to go ahead and come on back at 3:37.
welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place that you laughed about. Well, the names have all changed since.
Okay, that break zipped right on by. So sorry I couldn't give you a longer one, but because our time together is limited, I want to be conscious of that. If you are back with me, can I get a thumbs up? Any use of your emojis? You can throw in the chat. I'm here. I see a couple of thumbs up. I just want to make sure we have majority of folks before we continue moving along. Seeing lots of thumbs up. Thank you so much. All right, so this is the part I'm going to ask for your help with. So I'm going to engage you a little bit. I may have cheated in giving you a couple of answers beforehand just to get us going. But I want to engage you in this portion of the activity because we're going to practice actually mapping some things out. So I'm going to zoom in. I know it seems a little far away, but for now, I'll stay zoomed out because if you remember what our number one step was in terms of power mapping, it was defining a goal. So I've already done that for us. Today, our goal is going to be to slow vehicle traffic on Main Avenue and increase pedestrian safety. So that is our overall goal that we'll be working toward today. So remember, I described what this power map was actually going to look like in terms of the axis. So remember, at the top is going to be most influential, and that's not in the world. It's just in terms of our goal. That certainly narrows down the list a lot if we just focus it there. And we're going to look, least influential is going to be at the very bottom. On the left side of our screen or map is going to be folks that are strongly opposed to our goal. And then on the right-hand side of our screen, we're going to have room for people who are strongly supportive. So essentially, we should have about four different quadrants where we're mapping folks out. So in terms of we're thinking, for example, about that left top hand corner, that's where we're going to want to map people who amongst our group based on how we perceive these folks and how they've shown up in our community and all that stuff around our goal, their level of influence. So people at the top left are going to be considerably more influential but strongly opposed. Okay, same thing goes for the right side. Those folks are going to be most influential in terms of our goal and strongly supportive of our goal. So we want that. We want everybody in an ideal world to be shifting to the top right. However, we want an accurate depiction of where folks are falling. So that's where that bottom half of our map is just as important as well in terms of like just assessing where our partners are in terms of our issue or goal. So that bottom left-hand corner is going to be folks who are strongly opposed and least influential. And then the opposite on the right, so strongly supportive and least influential. Does that make sense? Can I get some thumbs up or a yes or some engagement in the chat just so that I know I still have folks in terms of describing our map and our goal here? Some thumbs up, some head nods. All right, thank you, thank you. All right, so we've already checked off our step one, which was our goal. Step two is establishing a team. Well, we kind of have already cheated with that too because the participants, you are our team of folks who are going to think about who needs to be mapped here and who needs to be included and has a vested interest around slowing vehicle traffic on Main Avenue and increasing pedestrian safety. So step 1 and 2, we're already down. Step 3 is that we're going to identify key players. So because I've kind of given you all these ahead of time, and certainly I'm happy to jot some more down and get them mapped, but I'm going to ask you to engage with me during this process in terms of like just mapping what we have here, and then we can continue to add probably all night if we want it. So we might just map these here and assess time to see if we have more time to get some more contributions on this board. So in terms of, let's start with the mayor. In terms of our goal, which is up here again, where do you think the mayor is gonna fall? Is that somebody who let's start with one part at a time. So do we think the mayor has more influence or less influence in terms of our goal?
More influence.
More influence. More. Okay, that's 2 more. Any other thoughts, contribution?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I noticed that you have a coffee shop, a middle school, and a
Uh-huh.
recreation center. Is there
I
like
do.
a backstory to this? Like, where are these buildings located in, relation to where we want to slow our traffic down?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much for raising that. Patty, was that you?
Yes, it was.
Okay, your box went away as soon as I started talking. So these are just people who may have a vested interest because maybe they're located on the same street. Just geographic proximity in terms of businesses, the schools, but also people, there are people at the top, like a mayor, a city manager, a public works, director of public works, city planning commission, all of folks who have a little bit more influence in terms of regulations that are associated with maybe putting a stop sign or a speed bump in a certain place. So just a few people who may have a vested interest in this goal, which is why the sticky notes are available at the top, because this is not all at all to be a end all be all representative list of people who do care about this goal. It was just my way of getting some stuff down just in case folks didn't have the capacity to engage. And nothing came to mind for folks while we were walking through this example. Does that help?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Alrighty, let me zoom. Whoops, let's go over here. Technology. All right, so I heard some dialogue around the mayor being more influential. Any other folks in agreement, in disagreement?
Yeah,
We
we're
can
in
always
agreement.
Okay, we can always move it. So in terms of, whoops, we don't want to pair you together. In terms of influence, we've already established that they are probably gonna be more so to the top of this. So we're gonna put them there for now, because now we need to think about their alignment or engagement around our goal or area of interest, which is slow traffic on Main Avenue and increase pedestrian safety. So do you think that the mayor is going to be strongly opposed or strongly supportive of that?
Supportive.
Let's say supportive for this one.
Okay. Calvin, I see
I
you come
don't
off
know.
mute.
It's
Okay.
I, it's dependent.
Uh-oh.
I don't know. It's dependent on what his or her agenda is. How
Mm-hmm.
fit in their agenda.
Calvin,
And
I
I
was
should,
thinking the same thing. I was like, who's gonna pay for it? Do they have money in the budget? He doesn't actually get to decide that. This is gonna get real complex real fast, Brittany.
No, and that's okay. Because that's unfortunately information that I don't have. In an ideal world, right? This would be a maybe 2 hour long workshop, and on the other side of that sticky note, we would have like their stance or like their history or involvement or their agenda on the back of this to provide a little bit more context. But I'm happy that the questions are being raised, because those are certainly things that you're going to have to think about as you're mapping folks, and really thinking about their alignment and their stance on specific issues. So, um,
Can I
we can,
say
we can,
that a
uh-huh.
mayor is a mayor is elected by the people in many cases, and so they're be more prone to support things that if comes from the community, they're going to be more for it. The city manager is the person who's going to be concerned about how you're going to pay for it, and the public works director. Okay, and so that whole first line you had there, I said, gee, you got the mayor and then you got the people who have to do the work to get it done. Will have a lot of questions and concerns about how do you get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for offering that up, Joyce. That's very important and helpful. Dana and Calvin, I see you still have your hands raised. Are those legacy hands, or do you have something to add in addition to like agreement to Joyce, or just additional comments around that?
Dana, I had something to say. I wanted to kind of like provide some clarity to why I'm saying what I said with regards to the mayor, because I know in the city of Detroit, a particular area could be owned by the city, it could be owned by the county, or it could be owned by the state. And so, although the mayor may be in support, right, and may have influence with maybe the county or maybe the state, whoever control that particular area, don't necessarily mean that, you know, they're going to roll in the way that the community desire for them to roll. It's kind of like my thought. I've experienced that here in the city of Detroit, you know.
Yeah, thanks, Calvin. That's helpful context too. Pamela, I see your hand.
I also think it would have to do with whether or not it was election time. If they
Mhm.
were looking to be elected, that would change their positionality.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And that adds to the pot, but it's a very fair observation of what we see from our position.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that just gets back to my earlier comment, right? When I was mentioning like these people are not glued to this specific spot because you could easily be in support of something and be outwardly supportive of something, right? But like come election time, you can be swayed, you can pull back on, being vocal about your support about a specific goal or initiative that community cares about or doesn't particularly care for. So we've seen that people prioritize what they're willing to convey, and their interests, which gets at like the strongly supportive, strongly opposed. And there was another thought I had. Oh, before you came in, Pamela, I think you said something, Calvin, or it may have been all of you, like just the dialogue that we're having around this. Something else, like, the complexity of this too is that you all are going to have differing opinions about who's in support of something and who's not. It could be based off of personal experience. It can be based off of maybe an experience that you have with your organization working alongside specific people who are you're going to be mapping, and that needs to be that's a crucial piece of the dialogue. But like generally, there needs to be some consensus around where you're documenting people so that you know how to engage with them as you're moving forward with action planning. So that's one thing I would raise for you all to be aware of and just be mindful of, even as you're engaging in this activity as well. So for now, just so that we can get a couple of more people mapped before the end of office hours, are we okay with leaving the mayor? So we obviously have a majority support of them being more influential, but would it make folks feel better because there seems to be a bit of divide, or we just don't have enough context to say whether they strongly support or strongly oppose something? Are we okay with just keeping them in the middle for now?
I don't think we have enough
Yes.
context right now to know
Yeah.
which way they'll lean.
Yeah. So we have some consensus around just keeping them in the middle for now.
Yes.
Okay. What about the coffee shop owner? How do we feel about them? If we're just kicking it back to how we were before, how we just split this up into two parts, their level of influence. What level of influence would we say the coffee shop owner has?
And sadly, not much, but they do have some level of influence as a business,
Right.
serving the community, I think.
I think they have a lot of influence as a business in the community.
Okay. So does this feel like an accurate spot based on what folks have shared? Joyce,
I would
if
think
you're
so.
thanks,
Don't you think it
Calvin.
shift over to strongly supports?
Well, we're
'Cause
just
we-
focusing on, yeah. We're just parsing these out into two pieces. So in terms of we're just gauging their influence right now, and I'm gonna shift it right or left after we come to a conclusion like, hey, we're thinking of them as being somewhat in the middle. Okay, now where is their alignment with something like this? So Joyce, not to call you out, but since we've migrated over into thinking about their engagement or alignment around our goal, any thoughts about whether they might be strongly opposed or supportive to our goal?
They're going to be more strongly supportive because more foot traffic and safety will push more people to their business.
Mm-hmm. I see some resonance. Other folks? I don't have the chat open.
I would actually think the opposite, only because if it's a small business and they have to do construction, the construction might make it really challenging to get to the coffee shop for the time being. So then if it's like a small business, they might not be able to keep up customers. But this is the fun of this thing, right?
Because it sounds like um, another split case, right? Same thing with the mayor. Like until the coffee shop knows, well, what does this mean for my business? Because building a speed bump is significantly different than putting a stop sign up. So depending on how their business is going to be impacted, maybe they're just like, I do care about pedestrian safety in terms of like whether I'm strongly, like that's like without a shadow of a doubt, I am opposed to something or strongly supportive. People can fall here and be a little skeptical, or it doesn't have to be at one extreme opposite end or the other. They can even find themselves here for if we thought about people who were most influential and strongly supportive, we don't have to keep them on this axis, but we are thinking in terms of proximity. If we think of this line as like absolute, and this, it just gets a little bit grayer, a little bit grayer, a little bit grayer as we move them away. It does become very complex, but that is the fun of it. Pamela, I see you coming off mute, so I want to invite you in.
As far as influence go, I think they have a little less than that. Scooch down a little bit more.
We can scooch it down a little more.
Because I'm
Okay.
thinking that you guys did say it was a small small business owner, right?
We just are throwing things out there. We're making a lot of assumptions here. We're choosing our own adventure, really.
Very well put. Choosing our own adventure.
Seems like me the Chamber of Commerce would be an advocate for that small business. The Chamber of Commerce.
I'm sorry, what did she say? I'm sorry, what did she say, ma'am?
It seems like the Chamber of Commerce would be an advocate for that small business. Is what was said.
And so that's how I look at the small business. It's all about the influence and the relationships that that small business have or don't have, the information that that small business has or don't have. Because there's a lot of skepticism. At first, my business is going to be slow, but when we think of the ROI, that's what business think in terms of this may be beneficial in the long run. So, and are they connected with the chambers of commerce? Those are all information that we have to gather through, finding out more about the business.
And I keep going back to proximity and location. Where are these businesses located? If I'm the small business that's right there on the corner, can I afford to have a lot of stoppage in my business? Am I going to lose my business if I don't have anybody coming to my business because there's construction or whatever is happening? Or am I halfway up the block? And so my business isn't going to change at this moment, but potentially my business could increase because now I have foot traffic on my block.
Parking for?
Yeah. You all raised some very good points. And as we've moved away from hypothetically talking about this and getting some grounding in our understanding of what it takes, all the intricate components and steps that are involved in power mapping, we see that this is probably the step, and maybe either gathering the team for folks to engage in this activity takes a lot of time because we have to have a lot of dialogue. We have to do consensus building because we have different perspectives about who's most influential and who isn't. So we could sit here all day trying to really parse out, well, what components, like what things are, what are the things that we don't know about the people who we placed on these sticky notes? But I go back to my earlier point about this really being our playbook. If you had a football team, I would love to see them play a full game without having any plays written down, having an approach, and how the quarterback knows the plan forward to win the game and beat their opponent, right? Or reach their goal if we're keeping it in the same realm as this, reaching their goal, which is to win. So, I ask that you continue to use this in your spaces if this is not new to you. I know that power mapping is no new tool for folks, but maybe it is new in this way, or maybe you didn't think about all of these steps because there are so many different versions of them. Either way, I would encourage you to add tools to your toolbox, pad your playbook, because it really, really will help you to continue to engage in this work if you have a path forward, especially if you're thinking about engaging folks in that work with you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now. I'm happy to even share the link to the Miro board if you want to do it as an activity or practice some or look at how I laid things out prior to engaging with your councils or your communities or whatever spaces you occupy that you would think that this would be most helpful. We do have 2 minutes remaining, so I want to thank you for your attention and time today and allowing me to introduce power mapping to you. And I want to leave a little bit of time for any announcements that folks may have until we see you again. So, anything, Danielle, Cassie? I think Cassie left.
Yes, Cassie left.
I got
She let me
something I
know.
want.
Sorry, Ma.
No, it's okay. Was anyone speaking? Sorry. Okay.
Captain said, go
Cassie,
ahead.
Cassie left. She wanted me to do the closing out and just let everybody know. Thank you so much for coming. It's that, Brittany, if we are done.
Yeah,
concluded.
we're done. Yeah, I was
Okay.
just giving you the floor for any announcements and
Okay.
things for folks.
Sounds
Could I,
good. Thank
could I
you all
share
for
one thing?
participating. Oh,
Could I share one
Calvin.
thing?
Go for it,
Okay.
So
Calvin.
I want to send out, I'm gonna send it out to Cassie. We having a health equity council on June the 8th, and I want to share that information with the council as well. And we do community feeds. So I want to also share that with the council. So kind of like share ideas that we're like actually putting into practice. So we can do it across the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin.
I'll send the information to Cassie to forward it to everyone.
Sounds great. And thank you, Brittany, for facilitating. You did a great job. Thank you all for participating. We will let you all know when the recording is up on Padlet. And if you have any questions, you can definitely email us. So thank you all.
Thanks, y'all. Take good care.